Welcome everyone to our electronic council meeting. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Council is practicing physical distancing and all of the councillors are participating electronically. In an attempt to speed things up, we have assigned a mover and a seconder. I will read these out. We will attempt to utilize the controls available to us for voting yes and no buttons for video callers. *9 if a phone call, and if this fails, I will call the clerk to conduct a recorded vote, and each councillor will be called upon alphabetically to verbally state yea or nay on each item. Regardless of the voting method, I will then state the result of the vote. If any of you want to speak to a matter, please identify yourself first. *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. So the clerk, Chris Fletcher, will now do a roll call.
Chair Redman.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Clarke.
Present.
Councillor Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Galloway.
Present.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris.
Hello, present here. Hello, present.
Thank you. Councillor Jaworski.
Present.
Councillor Jowett.
Present.
Councillor Kiefer.
Present.
Councillor Lawrence.
Present.
Councillor McGarry.
Present.
Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Strickland.
Here.
Councillor Vavanovic.
Present.
All present.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We will now start a vote reconvening into open session. This is moved by Councillor Erb and seconded by Councillor Foxton. Please use your yes and no buttons for your vote. Is it passed? Thank you, colleagues. That is passed. The council now is reconvening in open session. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. The minutes of the previous meetings, I would like to have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meetings. This is moved by Councillor Galloway, seconded by Councillor Harris. And they are the meetings of the closed council, April 22nd, 2020, council, April 22nd, 2020, closed committee of the whole, May 5th, 2020, committee of the whole, May 5th, 2020, and licensing and hearing committee, May 5th, 2020. Colleagues, now you can now vote. And thank you. That motion is carried. The next item is communications. There was an information package that went out electronically on May the 6th. In that package, are there any questions about that? There is also a resolution by Chuck Howitt, ink-stained Wretches, and Councillor Jaworski. You wanted to speak to this.
Thank you. Through the chair to my colleagues, I'm going to suggest that we wait to hear the delegate because this is a very important topic. You know, local media have been instrumental during this pandemic in getting the local public health messages out to citizens, and I know every one of us thanks them and supports local media. But many questions arise. Is this a local or national advocacy campaign? Do local media executives support this wording? It mentions a 2019 5-year aid package from the federal government. What's the status of that? There's just lots more to know on this this topic, which I think is very important. We look at the local media who tune in to Dr. Wong every other day, and to Chair Redman and Mike Murray, And so we should actually hear them out to hear how we can best support them. Maybe a council resolution isn't the appropriate thing. You look at all the things that the federal and provincial government have done over the past daily with this pandemic. And it was done through personal consultations with municipal officials, MPs, MPPs, citizens associations. So maybe there's a different way that we should be supporting local media. And I think we need to hear them out. So we should ask the clerk maybe to arrange a time that's better in our schedule when we can actually do a real meeting. And in the meantime, maybe suggest to the delegates that certainly I would like to hear from them, and certainly other members of council probably would as well.
Thank you, Councillor Jaworski. Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to concur with what Councillor Jaworski has just said. This is really a very important issue that I think sometimes goes under the radar, and I think that we should hear out the delegation and kind of give this particular issue more light of day. So when we are able to do that, and that may be at committee next time or at the next council meeting, I hope we could allow that to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Clarke.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question about the resolution, but certainly it's I'm prepared to wait till we actually get to this future meeting. But I was concerned about Section 53 of the procedural bylaw and whether this was in fact within our jurisdiction. But as I said, we can wait and explore that further when we do hear the delegation.
Thank you. Councillor Vrbanovic.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just, I'm certainly supportive of holding off on dealing with this, but I too am glad that we are dealing with it. I think what's become more apparent than ever during the last 2 months has been the real importance of not only print media, but rather all local media, television, radio, and print. And it, I couldn't imagine, for example, not having all of the local outlets that we do at a time like this in order to get key information out to the public. And so I'm hopeful that one of the things that will come out of this is the public in general will recognize the importance of supporting local media, just like equally important to supporting local business and so on going forward, if not more important, actually.
Thank you. So, colleagues, what I'm taking from Councillor Jaworski's comments is that we would like this to be moved to a time when a delegation could come and speak to it. So I'm going to ask for clarification to the clerk. Do we know when we would be able to, in this virtual setting, be able to have somebody delegate?
We would be able to do so on June the 6th.
So with that
Third, sorry.
We've moved it up already. So it's June the 3rd. This is assuming that Mr. Howitt is able to come. That would be when we would deal with this issue. Council's good with that? Okay. Councillor Jaworski is anyway. That's great. I would now like a motion to go into the Committee of the Whole to consider reports. This is moved by Councillor Jaworski and seconded by Councillor Jowett, that Council go into the Committee of the Whole to consider reports. I would ask you to use your yes and no buttons and vote. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. We will have one motion to accept the finance report items A through I. If anyone has comments, please raise your hand to be recognized. These are all moved by Councillor Kiefer and seconded by Councillor Lorentz. I see some hands. Councillor Clarke.
I have not yet mastered looking at my report and also being on Zoom. So I apologize. I have two questions, one having to do with the GRT bus stop maintenance and one having to do with the transit fare adjustments. And I'm just not sure what section of the agenda they fall in and whether they fall in the we're discussing now.
Item E deals with the bus stop maintenance. Do you want to address your question now?
Sure. I just noticed that the charge is $40,000 per month for the summer months, but was only $33,000 per month for the spring months. And I'm wondering what justifies a 20% per month increase.
So, Mr. Dyer, would you like to take this one? Or should it be Mr. Schmidt?
I'm not sure offhand what the answer is, but I can certainly get a response back to Councillor Clarke.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, and what were your second question was in relationship to which
The
report?
transit fare adjustments. That may be for later.
We'll come back to that one. Thank you. Councillor Galloway.
Madam Chair, there's a number of road-related projects. Just wondering in general if Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Dyer, I'm not sure if Mr. Bauer is on the call or not. Are we seeing some real favorable pricing because of the oil prices currently and the cost of asphalt?
Who would like to take that one? Is Mr. Schmidt on the call?
I am, through you, Madam Chair. We're actually seeing prices that I would say are pretty comparable to what we would normally see. We haven't really seen any unusually low or unusually high pricing at this point. All the construction companies we've talked to are fully aware of the requirements for distancing and potential impacts on them of that, but we really haven't seen prices go up. And I can't say that we've really seen any major decrease due to the oil prices being low.
Councillor Galloway, do you have further questions?
Well, I'm just curious about that because in the past, we've been advised by some of the bidders and some of the contractors, whenever the price of oil goes up, they increase the price of asphalt. So, and that's kind of understandable. So you kind of assume when the price comes down to levels that we haven't seen in a long time, that the price of asphalt would be getting cheaper. It's a major component of a lot of those contracts. Now, if there's a balancing off the price of asphalt versus the price of physically distancing staff and some of the provisions that they have to build into their pricing, that might be understandable. But I would have thought that the unit prices, at least on asphalt, would have lowered significantly year over year.
Through you, Madam Chair, there may be a balancing off that's happened, but on asphalt specifically, because often we will have a contract lot and the asphalt work doesn't happen until almost 2 years later. So any work, or some of the asphalt happens this year, some happens next year. So there can be considerable differences in asphalt price. We do have adjustments in the contract. So if the price changes up or down, the cost of the asphalt will be adjusted. So we just haven't seen any real big change. I mean, what you're saying makes sense and is logical, but we're seeing essentially the same prices, and we're not seeing unbalanced bids where we would look at it and see something's out of whack either.
Okay, thank you.
Colleagues, I see no other questioners. I just, for viewers watching this on live streaming, want to point out that item H, which is in this bundle of finance reports, is the proposed extension of consumer account measures. And this extends the waiving of late payment charges on water and wastewater utility bills and all other residential, non-residential accounts receivable till June 30th, 2020. It also extends the waiving of non-sufficient fund fees charged by the region on customer accounts to June 30th, 2020, and continues the suspension of water shutoff activities for water and wastewater accounts in arrears until August 31st, 2020. So I see no other questioners. I would ask, they've been moved and seconded. Would colleagues please vote with your yes or no buttons?
No one. It's carried regardless.
So that vote is carried. Thank you. We'll now start a vote to accept the Committee of the Whole summary. This is moved by Councillor Clarke and seconded by Councillor McGarry. There is a summary of recommendations of the Committee of the Whole. Was presented by Elizabeth Clarke, Chair of the Committee. Councillor Clarke, I believe that this contains the motion that you had a question on. Nope. Oh, it's okay. It's still down the road. Are there any questions in this summary of recommendations for Committee of the Whole? I would ask colleagues to please vote with your yes or no button.
Is he not there? Is Sean not there? Oh, he said there he is. He's in there.
Oh, thank you, colleagues. That vote is carried. We will now start a vote to accept Licensing and Hearings Committee summary. This is moved by Councillor Clarke and seconded by Councillor Shantz. I would ask you all to vote in favor with your check mark button, and if you're opposed, with your red X.
That's everything. Is carried.
Thank you, colleagues. That is carried. Mr. Murray, do you have any comments? I have no comments. Regional Clerk, do you have any comments? There are other matters under the Committee of the Whole. This is the transit fare adjustments related to COVID-19. Mr. Schmidt is up to review this. Do you want to hear what he has to say, Councillor Clarke, before you ask your question?
That's fine.
Through you, Madam Chair, as I think everyone is aware, we have had free transit for almost 2 months, and we have been both reviewing our ridership, and we're also obviously all aware that transit has a significant shortfall on revenue. So when we were looking and looked at both our fares, the ridership we're getting, the state of where we are with being able to protect our drivers, we believe we're able to will be putting in place Lexan shields to protect them from potential coughs. We're proposing a change to no longer accepting cash fares. We will be providing masks for our drivers. And at the end of it, we feel that we can safely start operating the buses, protect our drivers, protect our customers, and go back to collecting fares again. So we're proposing that we reintroduce transit fares exactly the same as they were as far as the amount goes on June the 1st. And the only change that we're proposing on the fares is that cash payments would no longer be accepted. So in short summary, that's the report you have in front of you, and just requiring approval on both reintroducing the fares and allowing us to no longer accept cash payments.
Okay, Councillor Clarke.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Schmidt did touch on my question, but I just want a little more clarification. It doesn't appear to me that the conditions that led us to put this fare reduction into place in the first place have really changed that much. Is it really down to masks? Did we have no capacity to provide masks before, and we now have that capacity?
I think it's through you, Madam Chair. It's more than just the masks. We have developed the Lexan shields. So there's actually plastic shields that we're proposing to put in place. It's quite a bit of effort to get those in place. We have stabilized our ridership, and I think we're actually seeing in some cases increases in ridership on some of our routes. So with the decrease of service from about 25%, we're actually seeing some of our routes getting a little bit crowded to overcrowded and have been having to add extra buses. So we think it's a combination of we're able to provide better safety for drivers, and we're seeing ridership going up a little bit, and introducing the fares will, I think, help not necessarily decrease the amount of ridership, but essentially reflect the fair value of the service that's being provided.
Councillor Clarke, do you have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Galloway. We can't hear you, Tom.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So Thomas, since there's still only going to be rear boarding, as I understand it, on the buses, people aren't going to be able to tap. So does that mean that transfer times are waived in the system? So the 90 minutes or whatever the transfer times were between bus and train or bus and bus, or, you know, when you get off and get back on again, is essentially mean that there are no transfer times?
Through you, Madam Chair, maybe I probably wasn't clear, but we would change to front boarding. So we would have front boarding. People would be able to would be expected to tap for payment, and then have rear exit as the normal operation would be.
Okay, I guess I missed that, because I thought that we were continuing to have the first few seats vacant and people were boarding on the rear doors. Okay, so in that case, then the transfer times will be in effect.
That's correct.
And in the event that someone has no pass, has no, but only have cash, what would the driver do at that point?
The driver would be expected to do the same thing that they would usually do, which is at that point let the person know that they should get a pass, and we will and are developing programs to get passes to people, so that will be started in the next couple of days, so that we inform people of passes or provide them with those passes. We would expect the person to take that ride. We would also expect that they would get a pass in the future. So I think we would try to treat the customer in as fair a manner as we possibly can, as we usually would.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Thomas. I support getting the transit system back and collecting fare revenue on June the 1st. As we all know, we've been losing millions of dollars a month in revenue, and as the economy starts to reopen, I think there's going to be some good news tomorrow from the province, and more people are returning to work on a staged basis. I think we're going to see increased use on our transit system. So June 1st is fine, but what I don't understand is why we would stop accepting cash payments, particularly when cash generates $380,000 a month for our service. That is a significant amount of revenue that I think by not accepting cash, we're putting at risk. The other thing I would comment on is that our operators don't handle the cash. The cash goes into a fare box, as I understand. It goes to a central location where it is handled and counted. And I'm sure the necessary safety precautions could be put into place. So why would we create a scenario where we would stop collecting cash and put that revenue at risk when I think we could handle it in a controlled environment?
Mr. Schmidt?
Through you, Madam Chair, I have Peter Zink is also here on, and he's probably more familiar than I am with the specifics of how the cash is handled and why we feel this is important to protect the health of drivers and other staff. So if Peter could respond to that.
Mr. Zink?
Can everyone hear me okay? Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Strickland, we were heading in this direction because of the amount of time that the customers take to pay with cash is a fairly lengthy amount of time, and there is some interaction with the operator, especially in the case when there are problems with cash and or issuing of tickets. So we wouldn't be doing either one of those, mostly to ensure that the customers proceed to the passenger compartment as quickly as possible. So we really think it's important to stay with a tap and go process to reduce the time the customers are with the operator.
But is the operator not going to be protected by a plexiglass?
That's correct.
And we've all experienced this in grocery stores where there's plexiglass between the customer and the person at the till. Cash is still accepted there. So I understand the need to protect our operators, but on the other hand, I think this kind of change in service delivery is actually going to increase the interaction, I would suggest, between customers and the driver and our operators when they learn all of a sudden that we're not accepting cash anymore. So if we were going to do something like this, typically the way we do this is that we would phase it in. Like when we have service review changes, we change a bus stop or frequency, we have public consultation and we talk to our customers. I understand where staff's trying to go here, but I'm not going to support that recommendation that we're no longer accepting cash payments until we think about it a little bit more and put in an appropriate plan into place and how we're going to communicate that and roll it out with our customers if we indeed believe that's the way to go in the future. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Rentz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I somewhat kind of agree with Councillor Strickland. It just seems odd to me. The province is going to make some announcements this week, and I'm sure next week we're going to be beginning to start rolling out more services. My question really was going to be, have we talked to JRT staff about long-term when we're going to start ramping up again? So I'm wondering if maybe not going with cash would be something we could probably put off another month or so into late June, early July, and give people more opportunities to understand what the impact is and make those changes. I think the 380,000, is that during normal times? It certainly hasn't been over the last 8 weeks, has it?
So, Councillor Rentz, just further to your question, transit fares are going to start June 1st, 2020. So
Right.
they're not starting immediately.
No, I understand that, Madam
Okay.
Chair. I guess I'm just thinking if this is something more that we should give it a couple of months to roll it out, and that people have a good understanding and start during the summer, which maybe we'd be back up to full service. I don't know. But I saw Mr. Murray shake his head. So the 300,000 is during good times, not during the last 2 months of it.
I think.
Well, it's yeah, if I could, it's absolutely not over the last 2 months because we've not been collecting any fare revenue
that's
over
true.
the last 2 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, so 380 is our average cash fare.
Okay, Mr. Zink, did you want to jump in?
You're muted, Peter.
Peter, you're muted.
There you go. Oh, you're muted again. There, unmuted.
Sorry, no, I have nothing further to add. Thank you for asking.
Okay, Councillor Foxton.
Councillor Rentz, are you wishing to make a friendly amendment to the motion?
I have no problem with that. If there's support, that would be wonderful. So I think we should move it up one more month to start at July 1st.
Okay, it hasn't been moved and seconded yet, so let's get it on the floor before we amend it. I see no other speakers. This is moved by Councillor Nowak and seconded by Councillor Shantz. And the recommendation is that Regional Council direct regional staff to take the following action with respect to transit fares during COVID-19 as set out in the report attached dated May 13th, 2020. A, reintroduce transit fares starting June 1st, 2020. And B, no longer accept cash payments on conventional buses until further notice. So Councillor Rents, did you want to move an amendment?
I would move that we begin not accepting cash July 1st. But I suspect that as we move forward, we probably won't go back. And it seems the emotion seems to say that until further notice. Well, I think once we move forward with this, I doubt very much that we'll go back to accepting cash. So I think we need to have a better program rolled out and to begin July 1st.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Strickland?
Just wonder if you could take A and B separately, Madam Chair.
You bet. Councillor Vrvanovich? Barry, you're muted.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair Redman. And I have to be honest, I struggle a little bit with the cash issue as well. I think there's ways of, making sure that the cash is safe to handle at the time when it gets processed. This really becomes an issue for people, particularly those who are marginalized or have income security issues, and potentially this would make it even more challenging, more difficult for them to be able to use their transit system. And so I think before we go down this path, we need to have a broader conversation with the relevant groups that advocate for that sector in general. I don't believe we've had the opportunity to do that in this instance.
Okay, I would look to Mr. Zink or Mr. Schmidt. Has there been broad public consultation about this, or is this something that is coming forward being driven by staff? Mr. Zink?
So this is, through you, Madam Chair, this is a staff-driven decision with input from our workforce as to a way to get back into transit business and collecting fares in a full way. This is the feedback received. It's also some of the steps that other transit agencies have moved forward with. We are speaking with community service groups, as well as we have spent a fair bit of time developing an online process to get cards out to customers very quickly through the mail. And so we were looking to implement that process in lieu of cash fares. So broad communications and getting cards in people's hand was our solution to that problem. And a bit of a soft launch of it in the start of June. That was our strategy.
I think just further to my point, Chair Redman, the reality is, some individuals who are often struggling with mental health issues or others, or other issues like that, would still be challenged in terms of dealing with these issues. I think, for those who have had opportunities to interact with these individuals on the street or in our shelters and so on, they would be aware of some of these challenges. Often they may turn to somebody to give them cash, actually, to be able to get onto a transit system. So I have some real reservations around going down this item. In fact, I would ask for a recorded vote on it.
Councillor Jaworski.
For clarity, so if somebody, as of June 1st, technically, if somebody gets on a bus and only has cash, they technically have to get off the bus. And Councillor Lorenz's amendment is to say, whoa, don't let that happen until, quote, at least July 1st. So I guess if I could just get clarity on those 2 points, and then maybe Councillor Vrbanovich's point about maybe we need to take cash discussion out of this discussion.
Okay, and just for clarity, it's already been requested that A and B be taken separately. And I would look to Mr. Zink and also point out that Councillor Rent's amendment to July the 1st actually is want of a seconder. Mr. Zink?
I mean, I can answer as well through you, Madam Chair. Yes, on June 1st, as it's written, technically, if you do not have the cash fare or an EasyGo card, if you had cash, you would not be able to to pay at that point. As I said before, we're pretty fair with our customers. If someone showed up with cash, wasn't aware they needed an easy-go card, we're not going to kick a customer off the bus. The driver would let them know they need to get a card. They would ride and hopefully get a card for future rides. Deferring it to July 1st would give us obviously a little bit more time to consult with individuals and with groups on what the impact might be of moving to a cash fare for them. I think our goal as regional staff would be the same, is to try and get everyone onto an easy-go card by making those cards easy to get, easy to load, and hopefully working with some of the groups that instead of giving someone a cash fare, they can give them a card and they can load value onto that card to take rides.
So, then back to Councillor Lorentz's point about July 1st, the delay to give extra time for consultation. What would give us the confidence that we'd be able to do such a consultation by July 1st? And what I'm getting at, since the amendment doesn't actually have a seconder, that maybe a further clarification of that amendment, Councillor Lorentz, would be that when staff are ready to come back with this report, which could be in July, could be in August, when proper consultation is done.
So I have other speakers. I'll circle back, Jeff, to you in a minute if I can. Councillor Clarke.
Thank you. I do agree with Councillor Ivanovich's point. I think it's a very good one, but I'm not comfortable. I'm not feeling confident of our ability to keep our staff safe at this point in terms of social distancing. And maybe I misunderstood something in the report, but my understanding was that it would take some time to get the shields in place. Did I misread that?
Who would like to respond? Is that
Madam Chair? Those shields are going in place as we speak, so work is being done on those, and our plan is to have those in place on June 1st before we start collecting revenues.
Thank you. That's a very different thing. Thank you.
Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good discussion, everyone. I'm just wondering, maybe picking up on Councillor Jaworski's point, and since there's no seconder for Councillor Lorentz's amendment as of yet, maybe we just defer B and send it back to staff for further information and to give us, give them time to look at it, think about it, and bring us back a report with more details on how this would be rolled out and consult with marginal groups, etc. And when that time is, it would be in staff's hands and when they would bring it back. But certainly give them more time to give us more information to make a more informed decision. So I would suggest that, leave in your hands, Madam Chair, that we just defer B to staff and have them come back with a report in the near future.
Okay, I have 3 additional speakers. Councillor Lorentz, do you want to talk about your motion, your amendment now, or do you want to wait till the end?
I have no problem with that. I think the bottom line is, and you're not even calling for movers or seconders because it's already been prearranged, so I'm sure somebody would have seconded that motion, but I have no problem in putting it off. I think even anywhere you go in this day, you see signs saying we don't want to see cash. No cash. We'll take it if we have to, but please use your card or your debit card. We used to have bus tickets. We went from tickets to the pass, and I think there's just a natural evolution for that. I think if there's a way that we can roll it out, I think it'll be a lot safer for everyone. And but I think time is what we really need to be able to explain it to more people. And I agree, we need to talk to the marginal groups and others that if they can load up cards for people that don't know how and show them, I think that's great. So my attempt was just to push it off so we had a little more time to be able to roll the program out. If another report comes back, I don't have a problem with that either.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. And you seem to have disappeared. Did you change your mind about speaking?
I was just going to say that if we're going to defer, I think that's the way I'm going to go. So I think deferral until staff brings back a report so we can deal with it appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Galloway.
Yeah, I'm going to support the deferral as well. I think I think staff now have a sense of what council is looking at. I mean, we may not be quite unanimous, but there are some options there. I also think that there are likely some employee relations issues here that have to be discussed with employee groups as well. And it might be dangerous if we were just to kind of go ahead and kind of overrule what staff have recommended without knowing what some of those employee relation implications are. So I think we need time for staff to deal with that as well. So I would support the deferral.
Okay, Councillor Erb.
I'm in favor of the deferral as well, but just for information, the protection that we're planning on putting up by June the 1st, is this different than what we approved in the budget where we were going to put these permanent? I thought that was not going to happen until the fall. So we're talking about two different things here.
Madam Chair, yes, they're very different things. What we're essentially putting up is similar to what would be in a grocery store for call it a cough guard more than anything else, versus what was approved in the budget was for driver security. So much more robust, a much more secure type of enclosure to provide drivers with extra security from things other than COVID.
And if I may, when will those be installed? Is it the fall?
That is a multi-year program, so we're starting on that. I think the installation will start this year, but it will take 2 or 3 years to get installed.
Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering, how do we defer? We have a yes vote and a no vote. Do you ask if the motion be deferred first and then we vote yes or no for that?
You've already split it.
The motion has been split, so we're looking at a report. We're looking at A and we're looking at B. My assumption was that we were going to take those separately. We need a motion to defer. They've been moved and seconded. Councillor Lorentz, you've withdrawn your amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I would entertain a motion to either defer A or B. It's B, I think we want to defer. Councillor Ranovic.
Yes, I'll move that, Madam Chair.
So you're moving to defer B.
To defer B and refer it back to staff for further consideration and input from relevant community groups, and to bring it back at the appropriate time.
Councillor Foxton?
I will second that deferral.
Okay, so that's been moved. And so I'm going to take the recommendation in Part A first. That has been moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Shantz. That's to reintroduce transit fares starting June 1st. All those in favor or opposed, please indicate as such.
All in favor except Councillor Kiefer's opposed.
Okay, that is carried. We had one no vote.
Councillor Kiefer.
Councillor Kiefer, do you want to be recorded as no?
Yes, please.
Okay, and now we're on to a motion to defer, which has been, this is Part B, no longer accept cash payments on conventional buses until further notice. This will be deferred and referred back to staff. And this is moved by Councillor Barry, and seconded by Councillor Foxton. Again, would you indicate with your check mark or your X? Okay, that has been carried. I would look to Mr. Schmidt to ask if you want any clarification after this debate, or do you know what council is looking for before this report comes back?
I think we're clear. We will implement the fares on June 1st, and we will defer the the cash fares and review that with various groups before we come back. So we will try and get that done as soon as we can, but given the summer break coming up, it may be as late as August before we get back.
Okay, and not to lose Councillor Galloway's comments about if there are safety issues with employees, we would want that to be part of this as well.
Yes, we will have discussions. We have had discussions to date with employees on this, so we will have to pick that up tomorrow with them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I would now entertain a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume. This is moved by Councillor Strickland and seconded by Councillor Bravanovich. Please indicate with a yes or no vote that the Committee of the Whole rise and Council resume. That is carried. I would now entertain a motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. This is moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Please indicate with your check mark or your X.
I think it's good now. Sorry.
That motion is carried, that Council adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. Motions? Notices of motion? Councillor Strickland.
Yes, Madam Chair. I don't know how we want to deal with this. I know on the agenda we have motions, and I don't know if we want to deal with it under other business or where's the appropriate place to deal with it. But I did circulate a motion to Council earlier today, seconded by Councillor Harris, and I know procedurally we would need 2/3 approval from Council in order to deal with it tonight. So I'm in your hands where you want to deal with it in the agenda, Madam Chair, now or in other business.
Well, I am going to ask Council's indulgence and maybe move it to other business simply because I know that we have Mr. Tony LaMantia waiting to provide some updates for us. So I'm in Council's hands, but if you're okay with it, we'll deal with it under other business. Councillor Jowett?
I'm of the same persuasion. I have a motion as well that I was wondering when we get a chance to address it, and I'm certainly happy to accommodate Mr. LaMantia.
So I see no objection, so I'm going to suggest that we will deal with these notices of motion at the end of other business. And I see no unfinished business. And we have a COVID-19 verbal update, and I would call on Mr. Murray.
Yeah, so thanks, Madam Chair. I'll be really brief. I don't have a lot in terms of COVID-19 update to add to the pretty comprehensive update I provided Council last week, other than to reinforce what I said last week, and that is, we are in the transition from the response phase to the recovery phase, and staff are working diligently on what a recovery plan will look like. A lot of that work is focused on regional programs and services, and how do we get some of our regional programs and services that have been suspended, how do we get them back into service? And another part of the recovery considerations is, I'll call it community recovery. There's a lot of disruption, and the region needs to play a part in the community recovery, whether that's areas like, well-being within the community, or areas like community economic recovery. And it's on the latter point that I had conversations with Tony LaMantia about work that the business and economic support team of Waterloo Region, Best WR, has been doing through the response phase, and they're also transitioning from response to recovery. And I just thought it would be a helpful opportunity for Council to hear from Tony about the work that he and the Best WR team have been doing. So I'll turn it over to Tony. I know he's got a bit of a presentation. And then if there's any questions for me or the senior team about any of the things that we're working on, I'm happy to answer that. But I think, in courtesy to Tony, we should let Tony do his presentation and Q&A.
Welcome, Tony. Thank you for all you do in the community, and the floor is yours.
So thank you, everyone, and you know, both regional council and staff, and through you, Madam Chair, to the councillors who probably took pity on me. Maybe I look like I'm going to faint, or look like I need to eat something. I just had an espresso to kind of juice me up a bit. So I'm going to set up my share screen, and then I'll walk through essentially what is an update. This will be my first presentation to the Regional Council this year, actually, so it's been a while. And then I will turn to our transition to recovery and how Regional Council can join us in this effort. So give me 1 second. I'm going to work through this screen sharing. And because I won't be able to see you or the body language, or I'll hear the questions, it would probably be swell if you save them to the end. But if there's a burning question, then just go for it. Okay, give me 1 sec. All right. And
you're good.
Okay, everyone can see that? All right, how did we get here? So I thought I'd share what looks like chicken scratch on the left when we were thinking, you know, I was huddling with Ian Klugman, Greg DeRocher, Ian McLean, and we had this idea that it would be important during the crisis period to be able to, you know, cast a very broad input mechanism wherever we thought it was very important to provide advice to the decision makers and advocacy, but also to be able to communicate decisions from municipal, provincial, and federal decision makers back down. And I guess to my luck, or you know, kind of the fact that I was able to share this with people, no one laughed. They thought it was a good idea. And that essentially, then my staff kind of made it look more professional. But that framework is essentially a very simplistic way to lay out what this, you know, kind of best Waterloo region is about. So it was essentially born of the need to make sure that we were not just advocating with one voice, but ensuring that the kind of the 90,000 or so stakeholders and firms that are represented by Communitech and the two chambers of commerce and our organization, that we spoke with one voice. And you know, we felt that going forward, it would be very important to cast a very broad net, and that's what we did. So you know, the four pillars are based on industry, workforce, advocacy, and GR. And communications. And probably because everyone liked the kind of business and economic support team name and acronym, the chair role was thrust upon me. You came up with the name, so now you get to chair it. So that's essentially how that happened. There's a total of 84 members, so we cast a very broad net. The industry committee includes 5 subcommittees: small business and not-for-profits, manufacturing, tech, and development, which is really construction and development, and tourism and culture. The advocacy and GR committee, workforce committees, and communication committees have more streamlined and narrow mandates. And the subcommittee leads and the objective is kind of laid out in this construct. So we were basically up and running by the end of March. Some advocacy highlights include 3 letters to the Prime Minister and Premier of Ontario. 2 were open, public, and 1 was kind of a private inbox only email, and 2 were also op-eded in the Waterloo Region Record, where we actually laid out some recommendations on the CERB, which is the emergency benefit, on the loan programs, on the wage subsidy. We're currently monitoring the KECRA, or the rent assistance, and there's more to come. But essentially, sort of in the last number of weeks, we've had a variety of meetings with key stakeholders. The working groups we've unleashed have done quite a bit of really productive things, and in a subsequent slide, I summarize their achievements and action items. I trust that you're getting the weekly Friday meeting reports that Rod is distributing, and essentially on the direct business support highlights. We've been able to have over 1,900 interactions and discussions with companies, assisting with navigating government support and local employment programs. We set up early on a COVID-19 resource page. Have had 1,300 visitors to that. Played a very active role in terms of local medical PPE sourcing and assisting companies with finding suppliers. We're doing industry snapshots. Involved in launching the Waterloo Region Small Business Center Digital Main Street. And recently, Communitech's virtual job fair had 800 attendees and 30 companies. Two of the kind of more notable highlights include Inksmith and our work early on with not just Health Canada, but also with the guys at ISED and Ontario Together and Eclipse Automation in Cambridge, which I'm really excited about. There's going to be more formal news to come, but essentially that achievement is really about getting our own N95 certification, manufacturing line capacity, as well as our own designs, coatings, and intellectual property for Canada, and it's and kind of the epicenter will be Waterloo Region. So very excited about that. More to come, but those are a couple of PPE related highlights. In terms of business support, we've created COVID-19 resource pages, and if you remember that first slide where we were talking about decisions made in real time, literally as soon as we were conveying the information and summarizing it in terms people can understand, we realized there were gaps, and then we were communicating the gaps, whether it was eligibility and inclusion, whether it was something they just got wrong with the criteria. We were communicating those gaps upwards, and over the last 4 weeks, we started a webinar program, and have had webinars on the emergency wage subsidy and work sharing, on the loan programs. We're going to be issuing one this week on the return to work or recovery, and that's going to be important because that is going to be phased in a series, and there will be different kind of milestones and guidelines. Let's call them playbooks or toolkits for food processing companies, manufacturers, services companies, and hospitality firms in the weeks ahead. The workforce group launched a Find Your Job local job portal, and that's been a big success. And we've also been issuing a blog highlighting what a number of our companies are doing to pivot. So, for us right now, the recovery is going to be about ensuring that reopening and return to work is done in a safe and an effective way, realizing that that each municipal EDO partner is going to have kind of their own focus and their own kind of unique challenges. And one of the things we want to do as we move to recovery is work on this transition so that more traditional relationships between the cities and the townships and their clients start to take place. I know there has been, and there's going to be more to come on that. There's been some discussion on a framework on that front. And it's going to be really important to make sure that, and I know that resources are already being reallocated to make sure that that during the reopening and recovery phase, there's actually a client account manager for the companies that need that help. And just kind of if you believe that imitation is the greatest flattery, through some third parties like Conway International, which is a subsidiary of Financial Times, we have been, and through other entities, the work we've been doing has been highlighted as a global kind of best practice, shared recently with 45 countries in a webinar. And new entities like the Toronto Region Board of Trade, Recovery Support Framework, what other cities are doing. They've actually used the language, this is our best Waterloo region kind of model, and that's what we're doing going forward. So, when we think about recovery, I talked about the importance of regional council and key elected officials, civic officials, and stakeholders. The ways that that you can assist once we get into kind of the recovery phase is to join us in promoting these best practices and highlighting the toolkits and ensuring that we actually have a central portal or at least a way to direct companies so that they have an abundant, reliable supply of PPE, which is going to be critically important. Just imagine Conestoga meets and their need for 400,000 masks pretty much a week and the cost that has. So that's going to be important. And then identifying any gaps. Regional councillors for the constituencies that you are responsible for, basically directing specific company challenges to us as a group. And in the weeks ahead, we're going to figure out a way to simplify the working groups. The leadership team met recently, so Communitech and the two chambers. And we want to simplify this thing that we created. At the same point, we also recognize that it doesn't make a lot of sense for the leadership team to say, all right, declare victory, and now you can disband, especially if they feel there's important work to do. And so we're going to let that play out naturally, and we're going to organically realize, one of the best things, for us, success looks like we don't exist anymore. So that's, as soon as we're able to wind up, then I think that's important. So I am going to kind of stop the share, or actually what I'll do is I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Tony. I think Mike would like to jump in, and then I've got Dave Jaworski. Mike, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, just one, just sort of to wrap this up and link it back to what I was saying before about work going on, to develop regional recovery plan, which we will be bringing to committee, the next committee meeting on May the 26th. And that recovery plan will both look at internal recovery and how can the region contribute to community recovery. One of the things that I believe is going on this week is scheduling a meeting of the region's Economic Development Committee for early June to continue to engage with Tony and the Best WR team about how can we all work together on economic recovery. So I think that meeting, I'm looking to Rod, who's nodding, I think that meeting is in the process of being scheduled and may already have been scheduled for early June. So that'll be an opportunity for members of the region's Economic Development Committee to continue this discussion with Tony.
Rod, do you want to add any comments?
No, just to say that we're just checking on councillor schedules to confirm the meeting date on June the 3rd.
Super, thank you. Great presentation. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you very much, Tony. I was wondering if you could expand on government relations activities. As you well know, I sent you a list of 3 things to which you replied, got it, already working on all 3. So obviously you guys are well in tune, Ian, Greg, and you and the whole team on government relations. So maybe you could just, we never traded notes to figure out, what are you guys working on, but maybe you could just expand a bit on that, please.
Well, so we in real time were trying to better define the eligibility criteria for the wage subsidy. There were some very significant gaps related to small businesses that dividend out income that would have made them ineligible. There were challenges with the amounts. There were challenges with the timelines. You might recall there was this crazy thing about a 70% revenue decline. And so there are a number of things that we were able to correct in real time. On the rent piece, that's one that is of particular significance because it involves, 2 governments. It involves the CMHC and it also involves tenants and landlords. There were a lot of misperceptions about that, but B, It went live this week, and one of the things that we're focused on as far as advocacy is gauging whether or not landlords and tenants are actually doing deals on the side, which makes a lot of sense, or whether or not commercial landlords in particular don't find working to take on more debt to provide this break to tenants as something that they want to do. So we're gathering this in real time. There are some eligibility challenges there as well, and we're feeding that up. So we have another leadership group meeting tomorrow morning, and that bit of advocacy is going to be important. Last but not least, I didn't actually talk about it, but I think it's fair to say that adding our voice to what FCM, AMO, and a number of you individually have advocated for as far as municipal finance and repair of that, not only short-term tools, but longer-term tools to ensure that it's not only about recovery through property tax hikes and others. That's very important. This has been an exogenous shock. We know how much money that municipal governments and the region are losing while costs are going up. And so we are actually working on a piece there. That one's a little more, we want to be very careful because the government is actually taking some steps. I read about that change in infrastructure formula announced yesterday or the day before. So we want to give kudos where they belong, and we also want to work with this group. That's one where, we did this on our own. We kind of been, doing our own thing, mostly getting it right, sometimes getting it wrong as far as tone and detail. But that's something that we're going to try to get right by working with our elected officials on this. So that's just, when you talk about advocacy, that's what we're up to.
Thank you.
Jaworski?
No, thank you. No further questions.
Okay, Councillor Bravanovich.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Tony, for coming in and for the work that your group's been doing. And just building on that last point, certainly appreciate the efforts to align with the work that AMO's been doing, and I know Chair Redman's been very involved with that, and the work at FCM. Where we came up with the proposal that's before the federal government now. I just want to emphasize what you were saying, because in 2008, much of the success actually came when we were able to get local governments and various other sectors from the private sector advocating together to actually see success with the federal and provincial government. And so, the work that you're doing here locally, I've referenced nationally, and is something that's now being sort of adopted by other communities across the country in terms of trying to expand their approach. I do know in terms of the work that you're doing, there has been a fair bit of interest from other municipalities, Edmonton, Toronto, and others. Wondering if you can just elaborate a little bit more on that.
So through the Madam Chair, Councillor Bravanovich, they're early on in the process. Some of my peers across the country, so I'm part of this Consider Canada Cities Alliance, which represent the 12 largest city regions in Canada. So think Montreal International, Toronto Global, Edmonton Global, Vancouver Economic Commission, Halifax, Edmonton, Calgary, all that stuff. So we had a national call in late March, and the business and economic support team, Best Waterloo Region, was already up and running. And so they asked us to share the model nationally, and we said, well, this is what we're doing. I don't want to overstate it's not a super original idea. A number of other communities were thinking about, constructs like that. But it's funny, that little chicken scratch really took off, and I think because I've seen it replicated in other models, but a number of them said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, because it's really about speed, using your communication networks to identify gaps, and then as soon as these decisions are made, help companies plan, prepare for the return to normal. So we had that kind of dialogue, and I have had one-on-one calls with Sudbury, with Toronto, with board members, with my partners in Edmonton and Calgary. But it's been more, I guess in some ways it's been a blessing and a curse that I seem to be at ground zero during the tech bubble bursting in 2001. I was in Redwood City, California when that happened, and I was at the province during the financial crisis, during the auto restructuring, and here I am in Waterloo region in 2020. What I've been telling my partners is that it's actually never as bad as people think, and I just remember the kind of how scary it felt when the tech bubble burst, and I remember, all of the horrible prognostications, during the financial crisis. And part of that national dialogue is just that I think, and it's not to sugarcoat it, but that things look really, really tough when you're in the crisis. But as soon as you start to move to recovery and you start seeing wins and best practices on how to stay safe and how to open up, the world's not that anybody believes that the sky's falling, but just look at our unemployment numbers compared to the provincial and national average. I mean, it's something to be quite proud of. We came into this very strong, and so I'm not surprised that we were able to do this. And in some ways, we're lucky that nobody tried to shut it down. They actually had an open mind and said, okay, this is a good idea, and please cast a wide net. Can you include, early on we neglected some key stakeholders, and so we got a lot of good advice on how to add it, and happily now we're into how do we make this smaller and more manageable going forward, and get our cities and ECDEVs, who play traditional roles on outreach and business development, get them more actively involved as we go forward. And so that's why I look forward to that conversation on the 26th. Mike and others. Yeah.
Okay, so the other question I have, just very quickly, it was referenced you're going to be coming to the Regional Economic Development Committee. As you know, the municipalities play a key role in economic development, particularly in terms of employment retention and so on. So are you going to be reaching out and coming to our councils as well?
If you want me there, absolutely. I think it's, just keep in mind that the framework that the cities are working on right now and the townships is built on, one of the guiding principles is that each municipality essentially has, retains autonomy over their own economic development. And so folks just need to tell me where they want me and the Waterloo Region ECDEV Corporation. Because going forward, as I said, the clearest declaration of victory for Best Waterloo Region is that we no longer exist as an entity, right? So we go back to some more normal kind of client account management process. And by the way, foreign direct investment and RFIs haven't stopped. We've had 5 during the pandemic. So two from OMAFRA, 2 from site selectors, and 1 from a multinational site selection firm. So certainly other companies and countries don't believe the world is ending. So that's a good sign.
Oh, absolutely, and it's great that they're seeing Canada as their landing pad. So thanks again for all your work, Tony.
Thank you, Councillor Jowett.
Hi, Tony. I was just going to ask you, what does our FDI engagement look like right now? And sounds like you've got more on the go than I expected to be on the go right now. So you're supporting our domestic investment, which is great. Do you foresee the province doing anything to help other than some of these programs that are a little bit more localized and have, by the way, I've looked at all of them with DeRocher quite regularly, and there are so many gaps in so many of them and so many loopholes that I do worry that it's going to have the resonation that they'd like it to have. However, do you see them doing anything to help foreign direct investment specifically, or are they just not looking at those kinds of activities?
So this is a public session, so I need to be careful. The short answer is they are. The province has been looking at what it does to attract foreign direct investment for a while, and so they've had some plans in the works. And I have a fairly regular conversation with the minister, mostly on advocacy and PPE and companies. So I actually spoke to Minister Fideli on Monday for about half an hour on some specific files. But maybe what I will say is, even though we've had these 5 RFIs, through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Jowett, there's been a very rapid decline in our projects. A number of them have been put on hold, and that's not surprising, right? Having said that, I don't think that localization of all supply chains is actually going to work. I get it for PPE, that matters. I get it for food. It doesn't make any sense in automotive, and it doesn't make any sense in other industries. And just, if every country adopted that approach, right, every country in the world, then our GDP would fall dramatically. Just, Germany's economic miracle after the Second World War doesn't happen if Germany can't export, and if BMW and Bosch and Mercedes and Daimler can't export their cars outside of Germany to Europe and North America. So while we're focused on localization of PPE, and we really want to make sure that we have our own, we're not beholden to any other country. I sure hope that foreign trade doesn't stop, and we have a president in the United States who calls himself the tariff man, and that's something to watch. But I think the province has some plans that once we get closer to normal, they're going to announce. And as far as direct support, it's an ongoing conversation. You've got to give these programs a few weeks to succeed or to fail, or for them to be improved. So we're actually going to be seeing some kind of anecdotes in real time, whether it's hospitality and tourism and kind of event management firms, and some of the challenges that they're having might be catastrophic if something's not done. But our goal is to make sure that the province and the federal government is listening in real time as we unfold. It's still relatively early days. Like, we're in week 9 of this thing, right? So
have you had to engage in any layoffs at your organization then thus far?
Yeah, no, thus far, no. We had a board meeting in late March, and while we've kind of stopped hiring, stopped bonuses, froze salaries, we have kept our team whole, and we firmly believe that that's the right thing to do going forward. And my hope is that not only our municipal funders, but the kind of the province continues to support us going forward. Keep in mind that if we're not whole in terms of our funding, then FedDev Ontario doesn't fund us. That's the way the formula works, right? You have to have a certain amount of funding. FedDev has done a 5-year deal with us to support, and FedDev has been great, by the way. They have encouraged us to pivot to work on what I would call local supply chain development, PPE, and that's what we're doing right now. So
I really appreciate it, Tony. And then I just wanted to comment. I'm so glad that you've got local food at top of mind there. Yes, I understand we need global markets, but I think this pandemic has made it abundantly clear we can never let a regional official plan ever endeavor to sway food away. We had a little bit of a problem with that back in around 2006 ROP, I think. We really, really have to protect the diversity of the different kinds of investments that come here and build locally. So I'm glad that you said that. Thank you.
So Tony, I don't see any more questions. I just would really like to underscore the point you made, that I think together we are so much stronger. When you can have the business community and local politicians all focus on common cause, I think is really, really powerful. Thank you for taking this on, and I really liked your expression, there's no wrong door. So it's not like you were holding out a beaming light saying, we are the way. You're saying, let us help you find whatever you need to in looking at the gaps. I look at Connect the Corridor and Two-Way All Day Go and other initiatives that we really have been successful. We are going into a new reality. Money is scarce. Municipalities at the area municipalities in the region need to all going to sharpen their pencils, but I can't help but have your voice added to ours. So thank you very much for everything you've done. You've been nimble and pivoted and allowed the community to do that too.
You're most welcome. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. So you don't have to stay on now. You can leave if you want.
All right. Bye now. Have a good night.
So colleagues, we're back to other business, and I'm going to recognize Councillor Strickland first and then Councillor Jowett, just because that's the way you asked to be recognized. So Councillor Strickland, do you want to talk about your notice of motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if the clerk, Chris, could put the motion up on the screen.
Bear with us.
Sure. So further to my comments last week when I was talking about what the recovery is and what our plan is, and I think this dovetails quite nicely to what Tony was saying earlier. What I'm suggesting is that as we now are moving into a I don't want to say post-pandemic, but we're now moving into certainly a recovery period as the number of COVID cases decrease. There's going to be more announcements from the province tomorrow about opening up other aspects of the economy. That I think it's important for regional council to have a direct stamp on what this recovery would look like for our community. And I'm not 100% sure how that would look in relation to what we heard from Tony and the Best Waterloo Region the work that committee is doing. But nonetheless, this motion is requesting that we adopt a pandemic recovery committee directly reporting to regional council and also comprised of all members of regional council. So that's my resolution. And I have to apologize to my colleagues. I know that the procedure is such that I should have provided notice. As you are aware, we're all just in full scramble mode, and I wasn't able to get to it in as a timely fashion as I would have liked. So I'm asking for your indulgence tonight to hear this motion and have a discussion on it.
So we can all read the procedure bylaw 1, 2, and 3 at the bottom. And I guess it's in the council's hand if we want to talk about whether or not we want a motion to waive. It would take 2/3 of council to do that. I'm wondering, Councillor Strickland, given some of the information that we've gotten tonight and the fact that there is a report coming, and I guess I would personally, I was on Zoom calls all day, so I've seen this, very recently. I'm not quite sure what the meaning of the last line is, but I also think that we are not out of the pandemic, as you said. We're out of response and into recovery, and I'm wondering if it would be acceptable to you just to serve this notice to council and we could deal with it at the next council meeting.
I'd like to deal with it tonight. I raised it last week and we had some discussion about it, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to put it to a vote for my colleagues tonight to hear it. I think it's a very benign motion. It should not be controversial. It's simply forming a committee of council to deal with recovery matters for our community.
Okay, Councillor Clarke.
Thank you, Chair. So what strikes me about the motion, about the resolution, and what makes me uncomfortable is the absence of any reference to public health. I really think that public health needs to be at the forefront throughout this process in recovery as well as in response. And I certainly have no objection to the politicians having a role, but I just don't like the absence of the reference to public health.
Okay, Councillor Bravanovich.
Thank you, Chair Redman. I'm just wondering procedurally if we should be getting into a discussion now, or if actually we need to even deal with the 2/3 vote question first, because it seems to me, I mean, that this is something that staff and everyone should have an opportunity to consider more in depth, and so, you know, I think we should deal with the 2/3 first, and
Okay.
we'll have the debate.
So the notice of motion has been put forward by Councillor Strickland. Has somebody seconded it?
No. So Michael Harris will second it, but you need to deal with this first.
Okay.
Harris.
All right. We need to deal with, hang on, this is new territory. The motion has not been circulated to councillors as our procedural bylaw would indicate it should have. The motion does not meet the notice of motion requirements of procedural bylaw section 61. And so to waive a separate vote.
So you need to do a procedural, to do this motion, you need to be approved.
Yeah,
you
so,
have to waive
okay.
that. Yep.
So we would need to waive this, we would need 2/3 of the whole of council, or 11 council members in favor of this motion in order to put it on the floor.
This is point of order, Madam Chair.
Yep.
I did circulate it to council this afternoon, and the clerk was aware of that.
The policy, I don't know if Chris wants to speak to it. I think it would have had to been done last Wednesday in order to be in line with our bylaw, Sean.
Okay, fine, but it was circulated.
Okay. So,
I request a recorded vote, Madam Chair.
okay.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, Chris is going to speak to this.
So just to be clear, what needs to be done before you enter into the debate on the motion is you need to pass a motion to waive the procedural bylaw with respect to notice. And that needs to pass by 2/3 of council, the whole of council. So it needs to pass by 11 votes.
So Chris, does somebody have to put that motion forward?
So you need a mover and a seconder to do
Okay,
that.
a mover and a seconder to waive the notice of motion. So do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Jowett. So I've heard Councillor Lorenz ask for a recorded vote. So the clerk will go through the roll call.
Councillor Armstrong.
Nay.
Councillor Clarke.
Yes.
Councillor Erb.
No.
Councillor Erb.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, no.
Councillor Foxton.
Yes.
Councillor Galloway.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Jaworski.
No.
Councillor Jowett.
Yes.
Councillor Kiefer.
In favor.
Councillor Lorenz.
Yes.
Councillor McGarry.
Nay.
Councillor Nowak.
Nay.
Councillor Shantz.
No.
Councillor Strickland.
Yes.
Councillor Vrvanovic.
Nay.
Councillor Redman.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, 7,
So motion is lost.
Okay, so the motion is lost and we really can't have a discussion right now. I'm going to ask the mover and the seconder of the motion, and actually, Sean, I don't know, is Councillor Harris seconding your notice of motion?
That's what I submitted earlier today, yes.
Okay. I think that this is worth a healthy discussion. I personally would like to see some clarification of some of the wording. So I'm wondering, this would then come to the next council meeting, Chris?
You can direct that, yes.
Would it be agreeable to come to the next council meeting?
Yeah,
Or committee.
The next committee meeting. I think
committee
would be able to debate it at the committee meeting.
Okay, I see Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I was hoping to ask this question before the vote, but are we not having, on May 26th, are we not having a report on a recovery plan? And would this not fit in with that whole picture?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
And so just move it to the committee meeting.
So if Sean and Michael will move it to committee, are you agreeable rather than council?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that will be deferred to committee day. And I guess I would encourage, if anybody wants clarification, they would go to Councillor Strickland or Harris to get some clarity. Councillor Jowett.
I just don't want to be forgotten. I have a motion sitting there too.
So you're next.
So Chris, will you be able to? Sue wants to speak, I think, Karen.
Okay, you were before Sue. Sue, would you like to have the floor?
Yes.
Just a quick question. Sean, if you could take into consideration what Elizabeth stated on your motion. So when we bring it back to committee, she asked that the Board of Health be involved as well. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jowett.
Okay, well, certainly when it comes to public health, we all fought quite strongly to maintain localized public health. So I believe we all take that certain responsibility and role very seriously. So public health is not a negligent thought in all of this, for sure. We know that science is leading this. I think we've been quite patient, but as we know, yes, there are other things that may come up health-wise, but certainly the rollout of economic recovery and the other things that are policy-oriented, we need to be kept abreast of. So the thing that I want to speak to is that I'm hoping that this report that has been asked for also includes an opportunity for a strong debrief. We're not altogether behind the fact that a report from 2008 that actually quotes pagers is relevant anymore. We are in an era of social media where I believe government has to be more transparent and more inclusive. And I am asking that we add to the motion the ability to be able to do a debrief as per the motion that's in front of you.
So Councillor Jowett, would that come after elected officials?
I'm sorry?
I'm just wondering where the debrief comes. Or are you just encapsulating this motion with those words?
I'm sorry, Karen, I can't hear tonight. Sometimes things are a little bit muffled.
I'm
That's worse.
Hang on.
Ooh.
So
Some people have to mute their mics.
Okay. I'm not muting mine because I'm speaking, but
I'm going to mute mine, Karen, okay?
Okay. So this is going to sound very much familiar, and that is it's the same 3 points that we talked about. Councillor Strickland's motion. It has not been circulated to councillors. I understand everybody got an email, but it was late today. The motion does not meet the notice of motion requirements of procedural bylaw section 61. and to waive the notice, a separate vote of 2/3 of council, 11 in favor, needs to be had. Now, Helen, I know we can't get into debate here. I would tell you that I don't feel like this is urgent and time sensitive, and I'm wondering, would you be amenable if we just defer or refer it to committee day and we can discuss it in its fullness at that point in time? So I look to you for direction.
I would, Chair Redman, but what I have learned is that we always need a motion if we want to get anything done. And this is pretty important.
That's great. So we're not throwing this motion out. We're just deferring it to committee day.
I've learned to be tenacious about my motions.
So you're good with that?
Yes, I am.
And who seconded it? It probably is in the email, right?
Yes, it was me, and I'm glad for that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Okay. So a motion to defer, we need to take a vote?
No.
Nope.
We're good.
We're good?
Right. Yeah. Next Thursday's notice.
That's great. So that will get a full and fulsome debate. And again, I would suggest that if you have questions of clarification or ideas about these motions, it would be really good to contact both Councillor Jowett and Councillor Rintz. So now I would entertain a motion to enact bylaws first, second, and third readings. This is moved by Councillor Harris and seconded by Councillor Galloway. I really have a lot of affection for all of you, so I'm not going to read them all, but it's A through E. So I would ask you to indicate your support with the green check mark or a vote against it with the red X.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. I now need a motion to go into closed session. This is moved by Councillor Strickland and seconded by Councillor Bravanovich. And this is to discuss HR matters. HR matters. So again, if you could. So that has been carried. So colleagues, I'm going to ask you to